So I'm in the process of unmucking up my head after this one head stud snapped off. A little bit of backstory. The valve springs on this engine were definitely due for replacement. Changed them all to a valve spring that was commonly found on the Z28. Engine was happy for a little bit, and at one point this one sheared. So here I have the other end. It's a relatively clean brake. I did put the rocker in a different bag. It's hard to tell if there's any metal contact that happened between the rocker and that stud to cause that binding and that shearing. So I did keep that one separate. And this is the push rod that was pulled out so I could at least bring the vehicle home. So I did check all the other ones. They were all darn close to 7.8 inches long. So if I go to... So they were all very close to this, which is the typical length for the push rods in this engine. So I'll be very surprised if it was just a question of this push rod being too long. I think it was just a question of the stud itself being tired. So I've already pulled out a bunch of the other ones. I've already did the drill and tap. I will be putting in some threaded studs once I'm all done and I've cleaned up the head. So now the fun is removing the one that is broken. So it may be difficult to see, but there are a handful of threads left. So first thing I'm going to do is see if I can thread the remainder of this and then pull it out the same way I did with the other ones. I'll be using the stock stud nuts to pull this one out eventually. So I'm going to try threading it with a 3/8-24 die. I'll use a slightly different setup. This one is actually part of a gear wrench and another local set that allow me to have a little bit higher vantage point so I don't have to worry about always constantly changing my alignment to not hit that stud. I don't want to remove this stud because you use a block to pull them. So I'm going to have to use this one as a reference before I drill that one out. So there is a little bit of thread left, so I'm able to get at least a little bit started there. So the important thing is this is going to cause a lot of shaving, so you got to make sure that you're cleaning it correctly. And one of the reasons why doing this with the head on the block is extremely difficult. All right, I think it's bottomed out. All right, that looks pretty darn good. A little bit of vacuum time. Now we can do a test run with not just to see how it's going to feel, how it's going to thread. So locally I could only find some grade 5. Ideally, if you're doing this, try to find some grade 8s. Future me cutting in, make sure you find some grade 8 nuts. The grade 5 ones were kind of cutting it, but they weren't able to hold enough tension between the two to be able to thread these into the head and torque them to 35 foot-pounds. So as soon as I got the grade 8s, I was able to do all of them so much quicker than with the grade 5s. This does turn nicely. The only drawback right now is how far down or how little depth of thread I have. So I will try going a little bit further to see if I can get any more. If not, I may have to do a partial pull and thread again just to be able to have a little bit more engagement and not have to pull the whole assembly off so many times to add more washers. All right, give me a few extra turns. Vacuum that out again. And now this nut should be able to go down almost all the way. Awesome. Okay. So this is a stud removal tool that helps you align the replacement one and also locks down the placement. So as you're drilling and then threading, it's perfectly aligned with the existing stud location. So what ends up happening is that the bottom of the new stud is going to be a little bit bigger than the bottom of the existing stud. Hence why you have to do a little bit of drilling and then the tapping. So before I can even think of drilling, I need to have a good reference point as to where this will have to go once this has been removed. So what I'll have to do is figure out how I'm going to have to line this up. So what I'm going to end up doing is doing a little bit of a scribe on both sides. This will give me a little bit of an alignment mark. I'm going to find a Sharpie so I'm not going to damage the metal, and at least that'll help me locate the closest spot accurately to where it should sit. So what ended up happening with mine is I had to expand this hole just a little bit, and what that means is that if I'm at least it doesn't pivot much in here. I just want to make sure that the placement is bang on when I start. So maybe hard to see on the camera, but there is a little bit of a line on both sides, so that'll help me locate it once that stud is out. So what I recommend is having at least 2, if not more, washers at the bottom. And if there's a little bit of grease or other type of oil, there's a higher chance that these are going to spin one on the other and not cause any binding. So the secret here is I was using on all the other ones the original lock nuts because I'm planning on replacing all of them. And then it was just a question of playing this game of thread them in, thread them out. And eventually you're just going to pull out the stud. So let's just see if there's one that's going to be a little bit kinder than the others. These have been through hell already, getting all the other ones out. So once it's all the way down, I know that I've got some engagement, but not enough. So I'm going to take one washer out. I want absolutely as much thread engagement before I start putting a lot of tension on this stuff. So at least here I have the almost all of the threading in. I only have 2 washers at the bottom, so let's just give it a little bit. And the amount of stud is going to slowly pull out. All right, awesome. So it started pulling. I'll add a washer, repeat. So I was cycling through 4 different lock nuts just because they get really hot with all of this tension, all of this friction. So this is a game of patience. So definitely don't try to rush this too much, or you'll just damage the threads and make your life a little bit harder, and you'll have to rely on another method such as maybe welding to be able to pull this out. And once I get to a point where I've got too many washers stacked, then ooh, this one's hot. Once I have too many washers stacked, I will switch to a nut with at least 1 washer. I'll continue the process until it's out. So already I've got quite a few more washers than I had originally, so that tells me by how much I've pulled the stud out of the head so far. We're definitely at a point where I can use a nut, protecting the bottom with at least 1 washer, and having at least 1 washer on the top, if not 2. And you want to make sure that the whole threaded portion of the nut. So depending on what you're using, your exact combination is going to be different. Definitely feels like we're getting close. Oh, and it's out. Ha ha ha. Here we can really tell the difference between the broken stud length and the normal one. And this is what will be installed after I'm done threading and cleaning all of the stud holes out of the head. So I don't know if you can see them, but there's two Sharpie marks, one on either side, that'll help me align the tool. So let's get this set up. So this is the tool. And it's pretty straightforward. Once you have it set, they do include in the kit an alignment pin. Actually, that won't be too bad. It's relatively, it's close-ish to the original, but not by much. So now what you do, you end up using one to lock it down. Tighten it down. And again, you're not trying to pull this one out, you just want to make sure that it's nice and tight. All right, so that's nice and tight. Take this out. And then it's a two-step process. So first thing is the hole needs to be drilled out. I actually have two bits going today on two different drills. Again, this was based on the information I had from my tap set. So that's a 7/16 tap. And the tap that I'm using says to use a 3/8 drill bits. You end up having to drill that open. And again, I found a way of finding the mark there. How, you ask? So now I'm going to show you the steps I took to end up knowing where to put my red tape marks to know where to stop drilling and tapping based on the height of this block, because this will always be installed when I'm doing both of those things. So the first thing is you need a digital caliper and one of the new studs. So in this case, I'm going to do everything in millimeter, but if you prefer doing it in inches, the result will end up being the same. So here, I'm just checking the amount of exposed stud. And if I come back, it's 0.44 inches or 11.4 millimeters. So now the important thing is to zero out the tool. And then you measure the length of the new stud. So let's say 48 millimeters just to make our lives easier, or it would be 1.8, 1.9 inches. So now that I know the measurement, I close it, I zero it again, and then I go back to my 49 inches, 1.9 inches. All right, then I can lock in the tool. Then I look at the tap. Why do I start with the tap? It's because of where the threading ends. See how I need to go roughly down to here to have a full thread? So then I can unlock the tool and go to roughly here. So that means that I need a little bit more than 2 inches to have my tape marking to know exactly where to stop and always have the right minimum amount of depth within the head. So now that I know the measurement, I can just line up the tool. There, transfer it onto one, transfer it onto the other. Important thing here is you want to drill straight. So there is a little bit of potential side to side. So you want to make sure that you're holding the drill nice and perpendicular to the head, not to your work surface, because there is a little bit of an incline here. And away you go. As you saw, there's a lot of shavings that go everywhere, hence why it's so much better to do this with the head off the vehicle. So now, the fun of threading in the die. Always good to have a little bit of lubrication on this. Again, it's going everywhere, but this is going to get cleaned up anyways. And what's fun is this block actually has threads to get this tap lined up to be nice and straight. So as long as it's tight, you're going to end up with a nice, clean, perpendicular tap. Sorry, I got to move the camera a little bit further away from the tool. Every once in a while, turn the other direction just to make sure that you're not making your life difficult. All right, so I'm at the tape mark, so I'll take this out. So now I got a little bit of material to clean off of that. So now what's important, and I'm not sure if it's visible here, with the bigger drill bit, I'm just going to clean off this top little chamfer. The goal there is to have enough depth that this little indentation will sit nicely within the part of the head here that is exposed. And how to find what drill bit to use? Best thing to do is to measure this and find the right drill bit that will give you the required amount of opening. That looks pretty darn close to what I've done on the other ones. And then, just to be certain, I clean the threads again, just to make sure that when I put the stud in, I'm not going to have any burring at the top. There we go. So now we got to put one of these in, but we also have to have it in snug enough that when we bolt this down, we're not going to just tighten the bolt against the stud and loosen it out. So I've already got one where I've got a lock nut set with one of the original nuts. So now I'm just going to snug that down. I'll give it a few turns by hand. Just want to make sure that the stud itself is not moving. Then got to loosen. What I noticed while doing this on all the other ones is unless I drill a lot deeper, I end up with the part here that wobbles. So you just gotta make sure you know which one is threaded. That one goes on that side. So if you put it down, you wanna make sure that it's nice and flush. If it's not flush, you're gonna end up with this alignment tool and being at an angle, and you're gonna create yourself more trouble than it's worth. So if it doesn't sit all the way down, pull it out, drill that little relief a little bit further down. So one thing I do recommend is try to keep the nuts that are going on the new ones fresh, that haven't been used for any of the pulling. That way you're going to ensure that you don't have any mucked up threads. I don't really care if I damage these. I definitely don't want to damage any of the new ones. All right, so that's nice and snug. So now I can start my little game of removing nuts. So what I've noticed in the past is just because of the depth of this head and where the threads start, I can't really use a sacrificial washer. So I'm only using this block without a nut for the first go. And as soon as I can put at least a washer, I stop. At least that way, I'm always protecting the tool, and I've got an extra item that can actually move. So I don't know if you heard it that time, but as soon as the impact bogs down, it doesn't have to be at full power. On this stubby, I'm going at setting number 2, if I'm on 2. So you don't want to go too hard and it end up binding. You just want it to be able to pull the stud out. And if you need more than a partial throttle to screw it down partially, that means it's crooked. So I'm already at a spot where I can probably put one nut. Yep, ooh, that's already hot. Let's use a different one. And you just keep going until you're done. Last one's out. So now same idea, I'll start by drilling, then I'll do the threading, remove the block, do the little relief for the stud, clean out the thread again, and then I'm ready to do a full cleaning of this head before I start putting the studs in permanently. And again, torqued it down to 35 foot-pounds. Here I'm in the process of replacing one because I had a rocker arm that the bolt backed out So here you can see where that rocker stud got nicked when the nut holding in the rocker arm backed out. Just enough for it to jam, and I just figured it was going to be the right time to replace these studs and not take any chance. Keep going with this one. Here you can see roughly the amount. This is actually too much thread sealant, so I would recommend you put even less in. And that way, what I was doing on the other ones was actually turning one stud against the other just to make sure that I had a right amount. And I'll just have to clean up all the goop excess that comes out when I pull this one, put this one back in. Here you can see how much of that thread sealant came out after I torqued it to 35 foot-pounds. And if you're curious, this is what I use. So it's 59234 Permatex thread sealant, high temperature.